Let's see here. All right. We do. Hey, buddy, how's it going?
That to me?
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
hey,
for
buddy.
you.
Well, you always say that to all the followers. I didn't know, or like to your audience. I didn't know if that was something that was nice. I'm good. I got a Coors for Uncle Shane pouring out,
There you go.
and then I got a Celsius, fifth one of the day, huh? Look at me go.
Yeah, I'm opening one up too.
A beer or Celsius?
There we go. Wait, for some reason my audio's messed up. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything because I hope you fail all the time. So
Okay, perfect. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so cousin Shane couldn't make it. He's just now getting together with his father for Father's Day, so reached out to our good buddy Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, college football, uncensored, and he's got all the time in the world. So of course he said yes. I'd love to come on this
we
platform
don't have
and
a dad, so we're good.
so how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I just am doing my normal thing. I've been arguing with Georgia fans online after giving him credit and compliments all day. Like at the setup at the new place. Over
Yeah.
here in beautiful Columbia, South Carolina. So things are good, man.
New haircut. You live in Columbia, South Carolina
I
now?
did. I moved back near home. So
Wow.
home, but you know what I mean. Because I have family here, and so it's just I don't know. Like I got Atlanta. I love Atlanta. I lived there my whole life, but I just kind of needed a change after a while.
So I got to imagine everyone there's asking you, are you South Carolina or are you a Clemson fan? How often do you get that?
I tell them coastal just to be a dick. Um, no, it's funny because like I was like talking to our buddy. I call him the bearded tomato, Chris Phillips from the Spurs Up show.
Yeah.
And he like showed me, he sent me a screenshot of like something during his actual live show, and like he's like doing his Daily Crow, whatever, at like 12 o'clock.
Hmm.
Somebody in the comments was like, "Hey, word has it that Chris Marler lives in Columbia now." I was like, "Somebody's gonna murder me." It's probably Ollie. It's got to be
Oh yeah.
Ollie.
As soon as
So
I find your address, I'm giving it to him so he can
don't.
send you some more products.
That was yeah. That's exactly what I need. But no, man, I'm doing well. How are things with you? You just every time I look at you, you're either on Paul Feinbaum saying things that hurt my feelings, or getting more followers and stuff. You're killing it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and hopefully, less than a month away from SEC Media Days. Hopefully, it's going to be our best media days ever.
Yeah.
I really wanted to ask you about that too, and so we're not going to have really a structure here. I'm going to try to make Chris cry as many times as possible here, but what are you most looking forward to Media Days coming up now that you know that you're credentialed and you're going to be at the event?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't started brainstorming questions yet. I had so much fun last year because I will just say from like a personal standpoint, not to be too serious, 'cause I know I joke around a lot. Last year was the first time I feel like I've ever gone, and I remember it was the first time people came up to me that were like, "Hey, I know you," and I was like, "Oh yeah, Saturday Down South, whatever." And they were like, "No, are you Vern Funquist on Twitter?" I was like, "Yeah," and then they're like, "Yeah, I hate you." So that was nice. But like it was kind of cool. It kind of felt like the first time I was like a peer of other people instead of just there. And I know you and I have had a blast all the time. I don't put out as much content as you do on there, so I got to bump that up this year. But going into this year, I mean, like last year we had so many cool moments. Like with Pittman, I remember asking him about his record against the spread and him kind of playing along with that. Like I love stuff like that, like the relatable side of coaches.
Yep.
So that like the guys like that is what I'm really looking forward to. I'm interested to see how Hugh Freeze handles the media because we haven't really seen him have to deal with anyone outside of Auburn
Yeah.
in quite some time. I think that'll be interesting. But he's done everything right so far.
Yep. Well, hey, funny story about this. True story. I think I told you this at the time, but when we were at Media Days last year, for those that don't know, it's kind of a weird setup. But we had a booth, and they put you next to other people that have similar shows, radio shows, and all this stuff. But the people next to us, I don't remember who they were. If they
Yeah.
were, if I did, I would call them out by name. But they were
They were
like
old as shit. I know
they were
that.
old, like Louisiana radio or something like that, and they were mad as hell that you asked Coach Pittman about point spreads and what a joke that is, and why
Right.
the hell they let these people in here. And I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
man,
That's the thing,
those
man.
dinosaurs, they don't have a spot anymore in this landscape. I don't feel like.
Well, and it's good if they do. I'll never try to. I've learned this from you is that it's always good to like your peers and stuff like that. And not everything has to be like a Brandon Walker type thing where you're just trying to make enemies. It took me a lot to honestly realize that when I first came into business, I was like very combative, like not just with fans, but like with people, like
Coworkers.
coworkers like you. I was so sorry again. But I viewed everything as a competition because that was kind of my background was like, from playing like sports through college, like I just, everything was competitive and it felt like everything you're trying to like compete for this landscape, this like little corner of what you're trying to carve out. And you really don't have to do that now. But it did crack me up because I remember you telling me about it when it happened. And I was like, that question in the Brian, how am I drawing a blank? Brian Kelly about like the what's in his best Southern accent, say this. But the thing about Pittman, like if you can't see that gambling and sports betting is not just having a place in all of sports in college football, but like kind of taking over in a lot of ways, like what are you doing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, speaking of trying to make you cry, here's attempt number one, throwing it up here on the screen.
That pissed me off.
For anybody just listening, someone made a graphic.
Yeah.
Chris Marler's 2022-2023 stats: 0 bitches, 0 good takes, 0. How bad that hurt your feelings?
So it wasn't like it pissed me off a little bit when it happened because it was a buddy of mine that did it. And because I was making a comment, it was from. So if you look at the actual post, it says TD Alabama Mag, which is like a online Bama thing.
Yep.
He had made this post that was like about a backup tight end that I don't even know, and it was like catches 0, reception yards 0, touchdown 0. I was like, this is the most useless graphic I've ever seen about, and somebody took time to make it. 0 bitches, Joshua. I had 2, thank you. I mean 1.5, but we're not going to get into that because that was the whole thing in Vegas, and I'm not allowed back, so it's a whole thing. No, but it was just the guy who did it. I was like, what is this even like? Why? And of course, as some of you know, I lost my Twitter account that I had built up to like, it's not like Mike's that has like 40,000 followers, but was like a shade under 10,000 and I'd worked very hard for that. And then I lost it on April 1st because of a bad April Fool's joke. And I've learned my lesson, but I'm trying to like build my shit back up. And then this thing comes up and I was like, this sucks. The 0 bitches thing was just unfair and rude.
How about this graphic you made? So this is a lot of what you do is make these graphics.
Yeah.
Teams with only 1 win versus Bama under Nick Saban. Florida, I didn't realize, ULM, of course, and Tennessee. But your caption, what'd you say, powerhouse programs with only 1 win. So thank you for admitting that Tennessee is a powerhouse program.
Man, Tennessee, well, and like, I'm old. So like I just turned 31. I'm lying. But like I grew up in like the 90s where Tennessee was like a dominant program all the way up and really until like the 2004 maybe.
Yep.
But like 95 to 2002, people forget Tennessee was one of the best teams in the country every single year. And a lot of people forget that because Florida was so dominant, right? Like, I mean, but like if you just take a step, like you just zoom out, Tennessee was right there every single year. And they're on their way back because they are recruiting at a ridiculous level. You kind of knew that was going to happen with NIL. So I know I had to get a dig in at some point. But yeah, Tennessee, man, I know we joke around a lot, but like it is going to be back to being one of the bigger. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like where if you have to start taking 2 weeks off now with like the schedule the way it's going to be,
right.
That Bama goes back to taking their week off for Tennessee because it's back to being how it was like when you and I were growing up watching it, and it's like just a battle every year.
So first question for you, Chris, prediction. How many points will Tennessee beat Alabama by this season in Tuscaloosa?
Man, if they do, I'm going to have to get my account banned again on Twitter because it's going to be awful. I genuinely think that game worries me more than any other game on the schedule. I think that Bama, mainly because I think that Bama will lose to Texas. I do. I don't think they have the quarterback thing figured out yet. I think Texas is a lot better than people want to give them credit for. What A.D. Mitchell brings to the table, you have 2 former 5-star offensive linemen that are now going to be in their second year. I think they're better in the trenches than people think. But anyway, the Tennessee thing, it scares the shit out of me as a Bama fan because you don't want to lose to him back to back. I mean, I remember losing to him for 7 straight years.
Yeah.
I do think Bama wins that game strictly because I think if there's one you circle, if you're Alabama, it's that one. I don't think it's LSU. I think it's that one. And the way they lost, in the fashion they lost, and I tell you what, they bring up the LSU thing a lot, and I know that you went on Feinbaum and said you think they're going to win the national title and all that kind of stuff, and we can disagree on that. But there's not a game that has been brought up to Alabama and Nick Saban and to Bama fans more than that game. And I think it'll matter. And it's also a built-in rivalry, like where it has a lot of historical significance to it too.
So you disagree with me? You don't think LSU can win it all? That gives me more confidence that they actually will.
Oh, don't even start, because I was on fire. Like, how many times did you bring me on this show to shit talk, and then what I said was exactly true? Pepper said hello. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I remember specifically. I didn't choose the language you chose. Not that I got a problem with language, but you said Kentucky kind of sucks, and
Kind of shitty.
by God, they. Yeah, I mean that was pretty accurate. So, what's your hottest take right now? If LSU winning it all is a little too hot for you,
I do think that Texas is. I know that we say this every year. I do think that Texas is going to contend for the playoff, actually contend for the playoff. I think that they are going to. I'm just that, you know how I am about Steve Sarkisian. I'm a big believer in him. The numbers as a head coach really kind of point against that, but I think this is the most talent he's had to work with.
Yeah.
Outside of that 2019-2020 Bama team, and then some of those USC teams before he was the head coach, I think it's the most talent he's had to work with. And I don't think the Big 12 is necessarily going to be a gauntlet this year. I think a lot of other teams, look what they did to Oklahoma last year. Everyone's talking about how Oklahoma and Texas coming. If you got the draw of getting Oklahoma like Bama and Tennessee did for that 2024 schedule, you kind of feel like you won a little bit, because that's a better draw than Texas. I think that's probably my hottest take. I think Texas is going to contend and possibly make the college football playoff. And I also think that you're going to have a Pac-12 team this year finally make the playoff again. It's the first time since 2016. I don't see a way the SEC gets two teams in, because I think Georgia is going to be dominant, and you're going to have both teams go 12-0, or have it an 11-1 beats 12-0 Georgia like
Right.
last season. I think you're going to have a way more parity around the country than we're used to.
But what happens if Texas gets destroyed by Bama in
Mhm.
Tuscaloosa and they win the Big 12? I mean, are we still going to respect them coming into the? I will have no respect for them. I don't care what they do in the Big 12. I'm kind of basing it on how they play against Alabama.
That's fair. I think that it's the second week of the season, so I can see how the narratives can change throughout the year. Because here's what I think. I think that people are kind of sleeping on Ohio State because of the quarterback situation. That team is loaded, and they're loaded on defense, which is something that we don't ever talk about with that team. The Pac-12, if you look at the quarterback situation, which is everything now seems to be quarterback driven from football in general, it's top to bottom. There's great quarterbacks in that league. Bo Nix is a great quarterback now. Like it's I don't know what happened in the last couple of years, but things have changed. I think that if Texas goes 11-1 and they win the Big 12, they would have to beat like a 12-0 Big 12 team. Otherwise, no, I don't think they would get the same respect, especially if they lost big to Alabama early in the season.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, how concerned are you with Alabama's quarterback situation? Because I don't know if you've watched the Tyler Buckner, I think is his name, from Notre Dame.
Oh my God.
I went back and watched him, and if that's
How was that emotionally?
Bama's quarterback, I mean, it was great for me because Alabama's going 8-4 if he's your starting quarterback.
I don't have any more Clausens we can get. Like, this is no, I would be shocked if Tyler Buckner is the starting quarterback. I know you want to put the pieces together and figure out why they went and got him. He's a former top 100 guy. He was a big recruit. He's only played for 2 years. He's very injury riddled. He's had some big moments, but you look at like what he looked like in big moments, right? Like, not just a lot of interceptions, but a lot of pick sixes and a lot of times in costly like moments of the game. Started out 8 for 8 against Ohio State. This dog's gonna start barking again.
A lot of dink and dunks, though.
A lot of dink and dunks. Like, and I think that's what you're going to see from the offense more. I think you're going to start getting like some of these tight ends involved way more. I know they lost Cameron too. They got a couple of good guys. They got a kid from Maryland that's coming in. CJ, I can't remember his last name because it's been a fun off season for me. I think you're going to see more of the tight ends involved. I do think you're going to get back to the run game a little bit, like way more, because that's what Tommy Rees does. I know you're not a fan of him, but I think that there's a plan in place.
The Kayan dynasty over there.
No, here's the thing. Tommy Rees's offenses, in 2 to 3 years he was the OC at Notre Dame, you ran the ball 60% of the time. Bill O'Brien threw the ball 51% of the time in 2021, and it's on play calls. And in 2022, it was 50.2%. It's the lowest they've ever had in both years from under a Saban coach team. Lowest ever. I know you got Bryce Young, you got athletes everywhere, whatever. That's not like I think that Saban that ship has kind of sailed when you look at you don't have an elite quarterback on that field, like or on that roster. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe is the best athlete every time he steps on the field on either side of the football. That doesn't mean he can play a full 60 minutes without turning the football over or complete 60% of the passes. It does not mean he's an elite quarterback. They don't have one on that roster. I would be shocked if Tyler Buckner is the starter because the amount, like I said, the amount of not only interceptions but costly bad interceptions. It's just not. Maybe he progresses a ton because he's only started like 8 games, but it's hard for me to believe that he's going to be the starter.
What game do you think will be toughest for Georgia this year? I know everybody's got that at Tennessee circled, but I think the week before, Ole Miss at home could be tricky, a little bit of a trap game. I think Ole Miss is, they're very hard to read, but they could be very good. And I think Kentucky, even though it's in Athens, they play Georgia really well. I almost feel like those would be tougher games for Georgia because I think Georgia would just be so psyched up to beat the hell out of Tennessee again.
Yeah, I think the toughest game they've probably already played because it was a spring game, playing against themselves. But like all jokes aside, going to Knoxville is clearly the most difficult one. I don't know what that Tennessee team looks like at that point. I'm not saying this is like in a bad way, but like long season, I think you're in a better situation this year than you were last year at the quarterback situation, which is crazy to say because I'm saying like for the full length of the season because when Hendon went out. What happened in South Carolina was tough, and you didn't have a guy that necessarily had like the reps for the whole season. That Nico kid is phenomenal. I honestly thought he was going to push for playing time and the starting job. Milton has been awesome to watch since he kind of took over in that Orange Bowl. Mm-hmm. But we saw what that Josh Heupel offense looked like last year against Georgia, and that's what would concern me. I still think it's the toughest game. I do because you get Ole Miss at home and you get Kentucky at home. Going to Knoxville is never easy, emotionally or physically. But I mean, it is. Sorry, my dog is just losing her mind.
What's more likely to push Nick Saban out the door, NIL or the combination of Brian Kelly, Hugh Freeze, Josh Heupel, and Kirby Smart just taking his legs out from under him?
So I don't think that the whole NIL thing is so dumb and overblown. I don't think he's sorry guys. I don't think he like if you think Nick Saban is having Pepper. If you think Nick Saban's having a hard time paying football players, you haven't been paying attention to football at Alabama in the last.
Well, it's not so much paying, but it's having to deal with that. And he bitches every offseason. Oh my God, we finished second in recruiting. This has got to stop. We got to fix all this. I mean,
well, so here's the thing, though. And I understand it's Nick Saban. Everyone hates Nick Saban outside of Tuscaloosa, and I'm sure that even me saying this is going to be a very logical statement, which is going to shock you. But people are going to hate it either way. Thank you, Craig Godwin. I'm going to screenshot that. No, so but the thing with the NIL stuff and with Saban, no matter what he says, it's always going to be taken in a way that's like he's complaining. It's this and that. Now, what he said this past week, we'll get into it, was awful, and it was dumb as shit. To be honest, if we're being 1,000% honest, do not clip that at all. But like what he said about NIL, saying that like. He hasn't said it's unfair. If you think that Bama's struggling with NIL or Saban is, they just signed the number 1 recruiting class in the country. They just had one of the top recruiting classes in the history of recruiting classes. They've signed 3 of the top 10 like highest rated classes of all time in the last 3 years. Now I'm sure he's getting annoyed with it, but it's a very like. Here's the thing: people like forget it's new. It was as soon as it was put in place, the NCAA just like washed their hands of everything and just stepped away. There's no regulation of it. It's completely unregulated across the board. From state to state, it's different. Remember when it first started? There was only like 5 states that even like allowed it to be in place. Like it varies so much from school to school, not because of deep pockets and owners, but because of the way boosters are and how competitive this like you're just it's a constant arms race in the SEC, especially of trying to find as many recruits and like facilities and all that kind of stuff. Got to keep up with the Joneses and be better than the Joneses in every single possible way. It is from state to state different in every conference across the country. And that's where you're having issue with because it's like and outside of all that, it's also like in its infancy. So there are a lot of issues with it because we're not used to being able to like talk about like, all right, we're going to pay these players. All right, well, we're going to tax them. Well, I don't know. We're going to pay them. It's like anything he says is going to be taken negatively, which is fine. I do think that what he's saying is what a lot of people are saying. Like it's what a lot of other coaches are saying. And sometimes right after he says it, but it doesn't have the same kind of weight because it's Nick Saban and people don't like him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just know they're paying a lot to finish second in the West, so congratulations for that, Chris.
That was
good. Let me ask you this. A lot of South Carolina fans listen. You see in the comments here, what's your thoughts on Shane Beamer and company? Can they overachieve yet? Everybody looks at the schedule. That's all they do when they see the Gamecocks. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to play this. You got to play Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee. Oh, my God, how are we going to do it? Well, they've overachieved both years. Can they do it again with Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells and company? And it has to be an upgrade at offensive coordinator based on just departing Marcus Satterfield.
So this just hit me as soon as you brought it up. And you said the word overachieved. What if this is just South Carolina achieving at this point? Maybe this is just who South Carolina is under Shane Beamer. Because there's not a team that I have been more incorrect about in the last 2 years than South Carolina. And I say this on our show all the time with South Carolina fans. Like, I almost just tell me what you want me to say. Because every time I see a game, I'm like, oh, there's no way they can go beat Clemson. There's no way they're going to beat Tennessee. And then they, put up 60. And then they go on the road in Death Valley and beat them in year 2 under Beamer. And, like, all those things. And each week, like, they will line up the next week. And I'm like, yeah, they're going to lose. Like, I will not. It's like my dating life. I refuse to learn a lesson. I just refuse to learn a lesson. So I think that, like, the way you look at South Carolina, I think at some point you have to start giving Beamer credit because that's a tough schedule every year. But he has done an incredible job at how quickly he's turned that around. I kind of feel like I don't believe they're on the level with Georgia at all. I don't. But there's a real opportunity the way from a culture standpoint. I know what Dabo's done in recruiting this offseason. He's got a couple big 5-star guys, receiver and linebacker this offseason. But you have a real good chance to turn the tide in that entire state if you're South Carolina, and kind of how it was in the early 2010s, like where they won 5 in a row. Mm-hmm. Because from a culture standpoint, how do you not want to play for Shane Beamer, especially with Dabo?
That was exactly what I was going to say. I'd much rather play for Shane Beamer than old Dabo over there and his Jesus NIL or whatever the hell he said. Yeah, what an idiot. All right, so let me ask you about Kentucky. I've been high on Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I think they're the team that's being overlooked the most just because they disappointed last year, right. And I was down on them then. I'm high on them now. Could you see another big season from Lexington? I think they could win 10 games this year if everything clicks.
Yeah, so, and this is what I said last year and people got so mad about, is that the issues with Kentucky last year was Chris Rodriguez always had issues with fumbles, right? Will Levis has all the talent in the world from a physical standpoint, but he was so bad at protecting the football, so bad. The show that you had me on was before the Ole Miss game, and I kept saying how the issue with this team is that they lost 3 offensive linemen to the NFL, which I'm sure is possibly the first time that's ever happened in Kentucky football history. Like, what Mark Stoops has done there has been incredible, but you're going to have some turnover, and you lose the OC, which I think I even lost sight of a little bit of how much of a drastic difference that was going to be. Mm-hmm. But they went from being a power football team, being able to run the football. You also lose like the best receiver you've had in program history since like Craig Yeast, in my opinion. All that happens last year. Now, you look at what their biggest failures were is they were bad up front. It's another thing South Carolina's going to have to be better at, too, is on the offensive line up front. They were really bad at protecting the quarterback, and Will Levis turned the football over all the time. Devin Leary is I know where Will Levis was projected in the draft and where he went and all that kind of stuff and how good of a prospect or whatever you want to say he is. That's an upgrade at quarterback with Devin Leary. 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I don't care if it's in the ACC. You do this as a true freshman? Like, that is incredible. Mm-hmm. I think you have an upgrade there. You bring back your OC from the 2021 season when you had a 10-win year, which was the second time they've done it in like the last 5 years, right? I think all the signs point to Kentucky being back to like 8, 9, 10 wins. I don't know if they get 10. I don't think their out of conference schedule is that difficult. I know they get like Louisville, But if they, I mean, Louisville might be sneaky good. I don't
It's
know.
the same as damn Georgia. It's the same schedule as Georgia, but no
Right.
one, because it's Kentucky, no one mocks them for it.
That's actually a really good point. I'm not going to give you credit for it. I might just tweet that out when you're not looking later. But no, I think that Kentucky is going to be really, they're going to be really improved. And I really think that like, I know what they lost, and it's kind of the reasons I was saying like last year, like they lost so much the draft, blah, blah, blah. I know they lost Rodriguez. I know they lost Will Levis. I think they're going to improve, man. I don't see how they don't.
Right, and one guy you didn't mention, but I know you know he's there, Ray Davis, the running back for Vanderbilt. He's averaged over 4.6 yards per carry in his college
Right.
career, and that was at Temple and Vanderbilt, which was probably the worst SEC team in history, just given the COVID and the
Yeah.
coaching church. So very, very impressive running back. Let me ask you about Florida, though, because I'm down on Florida. A lot of people are, and I've already made the jokes. I mean, they're killing it in recruiting.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Billy Napier's just loading the roster for the next coach.
Mhm.
If he doesn't improve, I'm kidding when I say that, but we could very easily sit here and say, well, hell, Nick Saban lost to ULM his first year. Kirby lost to Vanderbilt, nearly lost to Nichols. So we certainly can't write the Billy Napier story yet. We got to give this
Right.
guy time. But I do think this year is critical. If they suck this year and then next year 11 Power 5 opponents on the schedule,
Oh, it's like that for the next 5 years.
I mean, I don't know if you can stick with them if they're terrible for 3 years. So my point is this year I think is pivotal for them. What do you see in the Gators this year?
First off the schedule, I put out a video last week and we said this on the podcast, and I jokingly asked, I was like, who made the schedule? Was it Kirby? Because the schedule is out of control. So Florida is one of four current SEC teams that has scheduled at least two Power 5 opponents in every season for the next 5 to 10 years. Bama, Georgia, South Carolina, the two. Now, Georgia, South Carolina, and a little bit of Florida, they have built-in in-state rivals that are also Power 5, right? So, but those teams have scheduled very difficult. Georgia, I think, could put the excuse my language, put the Cowboys on the schedule, and I don't think they would bat an eye at this point. But I think when you look at Florida, it didn't do Napier any favors, right? Like Dan Mullen wasn't walking into a difficult schedule, and here's another thing. You brought this up too, or you brought up the schedule part. We didn't talk about this. They're going to Utah. It's the first time they're leaving the state in week 1 or 2 of a season since 1991. So all these things they've done as a program forever are now different. The gap between him and Kirby is not closing drastically this season. But I will say this, if you're a Florida fan, I'm not comparing these two programs, and I am not saying this is what's going to happen for Florida. But what year is the first year Kirby had a significant jump in performance at Georgia and played for a national title?
This is year 2.
Year 2. We are in year 2 of Napier, so let's take a step back. I'm down on him. I really am. I think the recruiting is great long term, and they did it all on the defensive side of the ball, which they really struggled in. But we're a very like, what have you done for me lately, prisoner of the moment type of society in general, and especially with our jobs. If he goes 6-6 or has a third straight losing season at 6-7, I don't know, because it doesn't get any easier. You might need to make the jump now. But I don't know what that looks like. But I don't see a lot of guaranteed wins on that schedule. And what scares me for them is this: you got to play Kentucky, Tennessee, and Utah in the first month. How do you what does that look like from like a transfer portal situation and a roster situation, and like keeping the team together if you're like 1-3 in September?
Right. Well, I also think the problem for Napier is Florida fans expect to beat Tennessee, as they should. They've owned Tennessee, but I'm not ready to say Tennessee is some dominant program. They were dominant last year. Can they continue that for another year? We'll see. But so you get that at home. That's one. The fans are going to be pissed if you lose it. And then I believe it's 2 weeks later they go to Kentucky. I know Kentucky has owned Florida lately, but that is another one where I don't think there's a Florida fan, not a single one, that accepts losing to Kentucky, which this may be Mark Stoops' best Kentucky team on the road. But again, it's just the way it is. And your point to the scheduling, I think they were smart because they knew the playoff was going to expand, so they started beefing up this non-conference.
Right.
And their anticipation was, well, if we go 10-2, 11-1 with this crazy schedule, we're going to be getting in this expanded playoff. They just didn't foresee a downturn coming, and it's hurting the coach right now.
Here's the other thing about that, and I've been Debbie Downer about this for a while because I don't think a lot of SEC fans get it. And the nature of SEC fans is arrogance, right? It's one of the first characteristics of most SEC fans. It's one of the reasons why Texas and Oklahoma make so much sense in joining the conference because, like for real, like think what other fan bases are like that arrogant and like dismissive of other teams. I mean, Texas, they leaked the schedule before anybody else, not even in the conference yet. Like they're the worst. It's crazy to me, but I mean. So I think that all SEC fans just assume, well, if you get 2 losses, you're definitely going to get in because the SEC's been so dominant. We don't know any of that. We don't even know what the resume criteria is going to be from the playoff committee. They haven't released it yet. They haven't told any of the conferences. It's one of the reasons why they kept holding off on the 9-game schedule. I know you were really pissed about that. I don't know why we're all just assuming. I get it from a fan standpoint, and it's great to watch these games. But if you're a program trying to win national championships and get to the playoff every single year, the assumption that we're making that every team that has 2 losses is just going to automatically get into the playoff is wrong. It's just wrong. Like we don't know any of that. Okay, so like I just think that when you look at 9-game conference schedules, you're going to cannibalize yourself even more. And if you're the SEC, man, like Florida, Georgia, and Bama started making these schedules with the 2 Power 5 teams every single year. They started making these in 2019. The 2025 Bama schedule was announced on December 1st of 2019. They were going to play Wisconsin and Florida State in the same season in 2025. Well before we all found out about Texas and OU. It was a year and a half before. We didn't find that out until 2021. Right. So you make all these schedules in advance, and you can say, oh, it's just contracts. You'll get out of it. We know none of that. Everything that we're responding to is just this assumption that everything's just going to work out great. And if you're a fan of like reality, which not a lot of fans are, and I'm not either, but like we don't know any of that to be true yet. I don't like it. I like winning. Like I like winning. Give me 2 FCS teams. I don't care.
All right. Well, I guess there's pluses and minuses to both, but it really boils down to I think it's 2 camps, Chris. It's do we care about the playoff more than anything, or do we care more about the regular season, which in my mind makes college football special? I realize more and more people, they just care about the playoff. They want to, here's my 4, then we're going to be doing, here's my 12. I mean, I don't do any of that garbage because I don't care. I care about Saturdays in the fall.
Yeah, man.
And 95% of the games, Chris, have no playoff impact, but I still love every single one of them. Right. So that's kind of why I'm in the 9 camp. But there's no losing here. It's still going to be fun. But let me ask you this, Chris: who wins the SEC first, Texas or Texas A&M?
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'll say Texas A&M because I think that A&M this year. I'm not going to say that they're going to do this because Georgia is so good right now. But this is the easiest shot A&M is going to get, man. They don't have to play Texas until next year.
They're beating Alabama. That's a given.
Yeah, you don't. Well, they don't get Bama in 2024.
No. This year.
Oh, this year. Yeah, I'm saying 2024. My bad. Oh, wait, so they do get Texas then. So I've messed up. Never mind. I'll still say A&M because I think that I don't know. I have a hard time. You saw Texas's schedule when it came out too. I don't know what all those are going to look like. Texas has Michigan on their schedule in 2024. Mm-hmm. A&M has got a couple of like tough non-conference opponents, but right now I'll say A&M because I think they have an easier road.
Does Bobby Petrino make it the full season as A&M's offensive coordinator?
That's fun. I don't know, man. Here, let me ask you a question. Who gets like? You've seen Step Brothers, right?
Oh yeah.
You remember like the song that was playing? It's like the most depressing song I've ever heard in my life. When they're about to split up at Christmas and the song is playing, it's like, who gets the family Bible when mom, it's like, it cracks me up because it's whoever wrote that song, checking on them, wellness check big time. But like, I just kind of think that, Mike, I've lost my entire train of thought because I started thinking about Step Brothers. My ADD kicked in. Hold on.
Well, let me ask you this. If they don't win 8 games this year, do you fire everybody? I mean, they have a roster, Chris. Yeah. They should be winning 10 games. This is garbage. Let's stop with, 7 wins. That'd be an improvement. 8 and 4. Right. That'd be they're a favorite in 10 games probably next year.
Well, yeah, and they have the roster. I do like the quarterback situation. I think everyone's asked the entire offseason. I'm sure the same with you. what's it? What that offense has got to be improved. Sure, but the word improved is such a low bar. Like especially for that team, they were like 94th in the country in scoring offense last year. Like
Right.
they were awful. Again, I don't know how they beat LSU by 15. Like one of the reasons I'm not completely sold on LSU this year because I think a lot of us forget that. But here's the thing. Whatever happens to A&M, their fans are lovely and they are loyal and all the things. But this is the best example of a program hitching their wagon to you got what's the best way to put it? You got fleeced by Jimbo Fisher. It's the best way to put it because that man beat Alabama by 3 points on a last-second field goal, which I know you're familiar with. He beat him by 3 points on a last-second field goal at home, and then goes the rest of the season. They finish 8-4, gets out of his bowl game because of injuries and COVID or whatever. Has the number one recruiting class. If you don't think that, I remember getting a text from a person from SEC Network telling me about the bowl game situation and telling me what was going on behind the scenes. He goes, "This is the biggest crock of shit I have ever heard." I'm not gonna tell you who said it, obviously, but it was
Peter
like
Burns, definitely.
What'd you say?
Peter Burns, I could tell by the language you used.
But the whole thing was it was so ridiculous, and you knew what Jimbo was doing because it's like, listen, I've got all this momentum. I've had a very mediocre season. Now I'm going to go sign the number one recruiting class, and I'm going to keep that momentum going into next year. And then you kind of like you fleece them not only into signing the Dan Ugla contract, the worst contract ever of guaranteed money, like he's a professional baseball player, 10 years, $75 million. You got an extension because you beat I know they went to the Natty, but you've said it before too, not the best Alabama team. And I just think that the entire thing has been such a system built. It's like it's like an economic bubble of some sorts. Like everything's built on a lie at A&M. Everything seems like it's just built on a lie. And if they don't win 10 games, if they want to fire him, it's gonna cost you $76 million to do it after January 1st.
Right.
That's so much money.
And they're so locked in with him. Anyone that criticizes him, it seems like they're the enemy. They're the problem.
Always.
When I'm sitting here, all I'm saying is hire a qualified coach. With that roster, you are an immediate SEC and playoff contender. And I'm just calling it like I see it. So
Mike,
you get mad at me all you want.
Texas. We think about Texas all the time about how that roster, they have so much. And you're recruiting the state of Texas, which is like you walk out in the backyard and there's a 4-star everywhere with like a can of Skull in his back pocket. Like, what are we talking about? And A&M, there's not a program in that state that they've benefited in the same way Mullen benefited when he got to Florida. That's what should have happened at Texas A&M. Mullen went to 3 New Year's Six games in his first 3 seasons because Florida State was down, Miami was down, he even beat Kirby once. A&M had every possibility in the world to be the premier program in the state of Texas, and they've done nothing with it.
Yeah. Well, their favorite coach is Lane Kiffin, of course, who running his mouth on. He's getting burned by Florida fans right now. What do you make of the Ole Miss? I mean, that's the team, Chris. They're the toughest for me to project every year, just because. I'm looking at the transfer portal. They lost like 30 guys. They added 28. They are like a legit NFL team that just goes into the transfer free agency every year and adds a quarter of their roster. So I just never know what to make of them. And then all these quarterbacks they're adding. I mean, it's either genius or it's going to blow up in his damn face. And he just signed this mega deal, so he's fine. He may be the next Jimbo. But what do you make of Ole Miss?
I think you hit the nail on the head, man. It's so hard to predict them more than any other team that's contending, right? It's so. If you're a quarterback, I mean, they just got a kid that got a 5. I can't even wrap my head around having a 5.34 GPA. I said this on our show, and I was barely kidding. If you added up my last 3 GPAs in my last 3 years of college, I don't know if they would have added up to 5.34. Like, it's absurd the talent they have there. Walker Howard, I think, is like possibly the most physically gifted. I'm not high on Spencer Sanders. I'm just not. I know he's got the experience, all that kind of stuff. I don't know what they do at quarterback. I love what they have with Judkins. I love the kid with the fucking Civil War name. What's his name? It's like Ulysses S.
Ulysses Bennett is his name.
Fantastic name. I think that'll be great. They still have the tight end too, Trigg, that came back, right? Like, I think they've got talent. I don't ever worry about the quarterback situation there because I said this going into last year. Lane Kiffin in 8 of his last 10 offenses going into last season, so before Jackson Dart. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I don't think Dart reached this. Those quarterbacks either had 30 touchdowns and or 3,000 yards passing. 8 of the 10 before that. One of the years they didn't, they had the number one running back in the country, had like 29 touchdowns and like 1,900 yards. So I don't worry about the offense at all. What does the defense look like? You get Pete Golding, which I think a lot of people were mad about.
You love him.
I just think people shit on him for no reason. Like, I don't love him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons I don't love him. I'll tell you what, if you're an offense preparing for Pete Golding, whoever your fastest player is, just put him out next to the boundary because he will put a fucking safety on him for the entire 60 minutes like he did in Knoxville last year.
I know Jalen Hyatt loves him.
What was that? He made him so much money, man. He made him so much money. No, it's so hard to think with Ole Miss because the schedule's not that difficult. They get Tech, I think, at home this year. They play some Power 5, or they play a group of 5 team or someone interesting on the road. They play at Tulane. But they get LSU at home, Bama on the road. I think the Egg Bowl's on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're Kiffin, the biggest game on that schedule is at Auburn. I think it's the biggest game on that schedule because everything that transpired this offseason, not saying he fleeced anyone like Jimbo did, but man, if you lose to, I think that's the biggest game on both of those teams' schedule, to be honest, because I think it will change the narrative for either team if Ole Miss loses that game.
So what do you make of Auburn with they got Gus Malzahn with baggage down there, Hugh Freeze running the show?
So I think the way you just phrased that is my favorite because it's one of the biggest things people don't realize with Hugh Freeze is that everyone always assumes he's like Gus Malzahn with the offensive part, just in general, but it's two very different offenses. I can't tell you how many times people have been like, "Oh, they got the running backs down there, and so is going to be doing this," and I'm like, Bo Wallace is a 2-time 3,000-yard passer under Hugh Freeze. I mean, the quarterback situation, I don't think it's got a lot of talent. I don't think Robbie Ashford's the answer. Maybe Peyton Thorne is. I don't know. But at the same time, what Hugh Freeze has done in year one, if you're an Alabama fan, and we're being objective here, if you're saying you're not a little bit concerned, you're lying to yourself or you're ignorant. It's one of those two things because what Hugh Freeze has done this early at Auburn is in the same way I said this for South Carolina and Dabo, you have a really good opportunity to change the power of those two programs in the state of Alabama, where Bama has dominated for years and years and years and still struggled against Auburn, right? Like with Saban being on the edge of what I think is going to be his retirement in the next 3 years tops, if Hugh Freeze gets them in Jordan Hare this year and somehow pulls off a win, you're playing with house money this year either way with him, right? But the way he's recruited and the way he's recruited the offensive line and the positions that, like, people say that he knows what it takes to win in the SEC. He knows how to recruit in the SEC. And that's the thing that I think is most important and is what they lacked most at Auburn. I think if you're given like off-season grades, you could make the argument that no one in the country and in the SEC has done a better job than Hugh Freeze at Auburn.
How many days off Twitter do you take when Auburn does win the Iron Bowl this fall?
69. No, there's no chance. I mean, I'll just stand in the paint and take it like I always do. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the question is how many tweets do I fire off before I fire off a rational one? Mm-hmm. That's the main thing because I'm going to be there, which is a mistake already.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, listen, Mike, we joke around a lot, but I don't think it's out of the question that Auburn can beat Bama in year one, especially because it's being played in Jordan Hare.
All right, final question for you, Chris. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man.
After Georgia wins their third straight national championship and they go the following season and beat the piss out of Nick Saban in Alabama, does Saban pull a Spurrier and quit just in the middle of the year?
Goes to coach the Washington Commanders.
That was before South Carolina.
Oh yeah. I didn't hear you say the middle of the year.
That's what Spurrier did. He quit right in the middle.
Flat out. Like they got housed by A&M and then everything went downhill. And honestly, I don't think Bama's got a quarterback as good on that roster as any of those fucking high 3-star white kids that Carolina had. Connor Shaw, Dylan Thompson, like those guys they were the same person. That was a Spider-Man meme at quarterback that USC was throwing out there. I think that Saban, I think that Georgia has the best chance of anyone in the country to get to the playoff. They play no one. Their team this last year was supposed to be like a rebuilding gap year. They're loaded everywhere. There's what's crazy about Georgia is there's so many people on that team and that roster that we don't know about. Like Mikael Williams is going to be like a Will Anderson type like guy, and I don't mean get shut out for sacks against Tennessee because I know where you're going with this, but like I do think that he is a guy that's going to put up like double-digit sacks and be a monster in the SEC. Everyone. I've heard this 1,000 times, and I will say that it's different. It looks different than it has in the past. But every time you count out Bama, and every time we think that they haven't made the right adjustment, something always happens. And what that something is usually ends up being like a very, very good season. So I think that Bama has a very good chance of playing for and winning a national title this season, even after losing to Texas in week 2. That is my prediction for you. I don't even know if I answered your question. But
you're absolutely right, Chris. That's happened before, but before there was no Kirby at Georgia, Heupel at Tennessee, Kelly at LSU, Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Yes, sir. I mean,
hold on.
Heupel's got more wins over Saban than losses, or same amount. I mean, excuse me.
That's okay. That's awesome. The Kelly thing cracks me up because it's like Brian Kelly's a great coach. He's a great coach, and they'll improve from year 1 to year 2, I would assume, right? But yep. I think there's a lot of tendencies. I think LSU's going to be really good, and I know that we're going to disagree on this, but there's a lot of tendencies from that same thing, that same blueprint that I told you about from A&M. I don't think LSU goes 5-7 by any means this year. But there's a lot of things from that
You're
same
talking
blueprint.
Out your ass now.
No,
come on now.
People forget about like LSU won that game by 1 point on a 2-point conversion in the last play. It's their 6th win against Bama in Death Valley since the Eisenhower administration. Okay, they're 2-9 against Bama in their last 11 games. They've never put back-to-back wins like that against Alabama. Like they've done it once, I think, under Saban. They've rarely done it in their program's history. So you have to prove it to me, like from that standpoint. For one, 2. Everyone forgets that after you have you get vaulted up to number 5 in the country from 14 and have everything in front of you to go to the college football playoff despite having 2 losses if you're LSU. They go immediately to Arkansas and they play a backup quarterback and they win barely by 3 points. Then they go to College Station after they won the division with all their starters and they lose by 15 points to the worst team besides Vandy in the entire conference. But they put up 30 in garbage time against Georgia, and they beat Alabama by 1. So everyone just assumes
they ran out of gas. That's all that happened. I mean, sure, they're reloading this year, baby.
But all those things I just told you were facts and not opinions. Those are real things that happened on the field. We saw it happen. So okay. Hey, before you go, plug. Where can people find you? Let's get you. What are you up to? 200 followers. Let's get you to 250. That's good. Yeah, I lost that damn account. Just a little word of advice out there. Don't ever make a Kirby Smart sex tape joke on April Fools if you are trying to make your dreams come true on social media. Anyway, Vern Funquist on Twitter and Instagram. Vern, Vern Funquist. And name obviously is Chris Marler. And then obviously, like Mike said earlier, the podcast is called College Football Uncensored. We have new episodes that come out every Tuesday. And yeah, it's pretty much it, man. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm like I always say when I'm on here, I'm so happy for all the success you've had. I'm so proud of you, man. You're killing it, and I hope you keep it up.
Absolutely. Hope to see you. Well, I know I'll see you here soon in Nashville, SEC Media Days. Thank you so much for showing up, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, dude.